In a September 2025 Gallup survey, just 54% of respondents said that they view capitalism positively. That's down from 60% from the same survey in 2021. It feels almost laughably obvious to most Americans that things are not working. That feeling of dissatisfaction with the way our lives are going is manifesting in different ways. It's manifesting differently along gender lines, political lines, and class lines, and it's largely what caused Trump's second term. As someone who falls on the left side of things politically, who is in a middle-class household financially, and who comes from a low-income background, I feel a vulnerability in today's economy that I don't think I've ever felt before in my life. I'm Kara Perez, host of Kara Explores Money and author of Money for Change. And I'm here to ask you to become a patron. Patrons help support this show as well as the work that I do elsewhere on the internet. And I would love for this show to remain one of the very few ad-free spaces that we have in our world. But in order to do that, I do have to ask you to support me. But don't worry, I'm giving you something back besides just this show. Patrons get all sorts of awesome bonuses, including event discounts, access to our exclusive Discord, as well as things like Camp Money, our monthly budgeting session, and AMAs with me where you can pop up and ask me all of your money questions. If you're interested in becoming a patron, you can find the link in our show description. Now, what exactly is it that Americans are dissatisfied with, and what is it making us feel and think? A lot of our problems here in the United States can be wrapped up in one word, and it's become a bit of a buzzword: capitalism. We're going to be doing a deep dive into capitalism next month, so make sure to subscribe to the show, but let's define it for our conversation today. Capitalism is an economic system of ownership where production and labor is designed to produce maximum profits for the owner. It's about 500 years old as far as economic systems go, and it's honestly not a great system because the pursuit of profit is fundamentally unsustainable on a planet with finite resources. Now, capitalism could work great in theory, because theoretically, capitalism creates a, quote, free market, where the services and goods available and their prices are determined by the demand for said things. This demand then, again, theoretically, should create competition between companies, which again should drive down costs for the purchaser class and create profits for the owner class, who then reinvest the money in order to continue innovating and providing the absolute best product for the masses. Except that's not how it's ever really worked, and that's definitely not how it's working right now. The American economy, for example, is the biggest example of capitalism in the world, and it was literally built on unpaid labor, that of kidnapped and enslaved Africans and African Americans. To quote Hamilton the musical, "A civics lesson from a slaver, hey neighbor, your debts are paid because you don't pay for labor." You may have heard the term late-stage capitalism to refer to our economy in present-day America. And this is basically shorthand for saying, shit's fucked. Because instead of free market competition, what we have now is a form of capitalism referred to as shareholder capitalism. We have monopolies that buy up or destroy their competition. We don't have a system where economic diversity thrives. We have a system where a very small amount of companies and individuals hold a staggering amount of wealth and power. And they use said wealth and power to rig the system further in their favor through things like lobbying for government policies that benefit them or prevent social changes that would eat into their profit. Take TurboTax, for example, which has for years lobbied the US government against making it free to file taxes. Or, in a particularly heinous example, baby formula companies that lobby against paid parental leave because they want parents to have to go to work and to be too busy to feed their kids, and so they have to buy their own products. Capitalism in the United States today is all about generating as much profit as possible at whatever cost for the shareholders who own majority stakes in the biggest companies available in the stock market. So in the face of these oligarchs and these giant corporations doing all this shady stuff, the average American is feeling, well, disheartened would be putting it nicely. Along different political lines, along different class lines, along different racial lines, pretty much everybody in the United States right now feels like something is off. And not only are people becoming disillusioned with capitalism, but more Americans say that the future of our country looks worse than the past. A July 2025 Wall Street Journal NORC study found that nearly 70% of registered voters said that the idea that if you worked hard, you would get ahead no longer held true or never did. This is the highest percentage in nearly 15 years of surveying. Now, I'm going to counteract this just a little bit. I am a pretty optimistic person naturally, and I actually have a very strong belief that people can create huge change in the face of huge odds. It's basically what my book, Money for Change, is all about, so check that out. And it's that belief that fuels the work I do, both professionally and personally. But I know many of you are probably listening and giving me a little side eye and asking, Kara, for real, what can one person do? How do we as individuals function, let alone thrive, let alone create massive change in this world? Well, y'all, I'm reminded of the Margaret Mead quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has." This social tension, as well as our ability to create change, is what my guest and I explore today. My guest is Hadassah Damien, founder of Ride Free Fearless Money. Hadassah is a design strategist and facilitator, economics researcher, and finance educator. She's well known in the financial space for her focus on anti-capitalist financial education and choosing to earn, use, and save her money differently from the status quo, something that is becoming more and more appealing to more and more people. Okay, so you and I are both financial educators who very much so side-eye the economic systems that we live in. And for me, that has been a huge struggle really since I started my business, but especially this year. And I legitimately had a minor breakdown in early August, just watching so many financial content creators insist that all you need is like an HYSA while we watch Gaza get bombed with our tax dollars. So to an extent, you have to compartmentalize in order to function in our current system. And I would just love to know how you deal with that.
Oh, Kara, it's such a good point. Back in the day when we used to have bumper stickers, there was this bumper sticker that's like, the only sane response to an insane society is insanity or whatever, right? Like, and of course, like naming that there's some ableism and ways that we don't talk about mental health in that bumper sticker anymore. I asked myself, am I supposed to have some sort of like coherent, cohesive, singular identity, you know what I mean, like in response to how the world actually is right now? And I think the answer is no, because it's impossible, because there's so many fragmented things happening that don't make sense together. So of course I can't have like a singular way of responding to it. Over the last couple of months, like really over 2025, I've shifted the focus of Ride Free Fearless Money to go from talking about like money tactics to like strategic tactics, because to your point about the high yield savings account, like, yeah, go get a high yield savings account wherever and move on. And if you really want to, give yourself a pat on the back, do it at a cooperative, bank or like a credit union or a co-op, and move on. There's so many other questions that I think we can be asking ourselves right now that are about, what is my place and what is my sphere of influence, and like what can I do in the world? And there's this piece of art that I have on my computer screen. I've had it there for years, and it's two circles with like a little tiny Venn diagram, and one of the circles says things I can control, and one of the circles says things that matter. And there's like a little tiny slice where the two are together. And when I'm thinking about strategy, I'm thinking about operating at that slice. And like which high yield savings account you pick is mostly in the things that don't super matter, right? A little bit. It matters a little bit. Give it a little bit of thought, but then get it done and move on and go to the things that are actually much more meaningful, right? Like where am I spending my money? BDS is still real. We can still participate in it, right? When we're thinking about the horrific genocide in Gaza, right? Like we can not purchase from Israeli companies. We can actually figure out how to like move material support to families that are evacuating Gaza, right? Like I would much rather you get a high yield savings account where the hell ever, and then take whatever money you get from that and like redistribute it to somebody who is actually trying to survive in the world that our larger society has created.
Yeah, I really resonate with when you were saying, like, pick a high yield savings account and move on. Because we are living in a time where, especially in the United States, everything coming out of the White House, it's just rapid fire chaos and bad news. And it's designed to paralyze you. So the idea of move on, like keep moving forward, really resonates with me because I am struggling with that. And I think so many other people are. And I think in this moment, so many people are craving security. And you kind of see that with the memes of like, I miss when I didn't have to think about who the president was every single day, right? Because like when Obama, just as an example, was president, a lot of liberals in the country felt very safe and very protected and did not have to worry about as many things as they have to now. And that's not to say that other people didn't have to worry about their rights under Obama. It's just that a lot of like rich white liberals didn't have to. So people are seeking security in a way that they did not have to before. And a lot of that is getting tied up in their money. And something that you've written a lot about, made a lot of content about, is the idea of what is enough money. So what does it mean to you to have enough money?
When I'm thinking about something like, how do I know if I have enough, or how do I know if I feel secure? One of the big things I'm thinking about is, well, what's the definition of enough, or what's the definition of secure for you? Like, what are the components? What are the criteria? How would you know? What could I point to and say, yep, I feel secure if I have that, or I feel like I have enough if I have that? And for me, personally, like I grew up like poor working class, we were going to the food bank, single mom. So for me, if I can go to the grocery store and not have to look at prices, I mean, that feels rich, that feels like enough. I'm like, I have enough to not actually have to like mentally calculate the cost of everything that I'm buying as I go. I have enough. That's my signifier for me. But everybody's going to have their own different version of what that is. In particular, I think that's really astute, Kara, like over the last 8 months or so, have been feeling insecure and like there's not enough. And like there are some very material economic like things that are happening, right? Our economy is tanking right now. There's not enough jobs. There's not the funding that there used to be. But that is a material point. But like aside from that, I've had a lot of conversations with people where they're like, I'm not sure if I have enough, or I'm feeling really insecure. I'll say, okay, let's just put aside how much money you're making, what's in savings right now. Let's just do a thought experiment. What would you point to know you had enough? What would you look at and say, yeah, I feel secure, right? Is it a certain number of money? Is it an amount of money in the bank? Is it an amount of time you didn't have to work? Is it people you could call if you need something, right? Like, let's think about the other ways that you might be resourcing covering problems, right? And because I'll often hear people say like, oh, well, what about my housing? What about covering my needs? I'm like, okay, we could look at the money that you might have or make to point to security. Are there any other ways that you would take care of those things, that you would cover those things? Is there somebody you could go live with? And we really start to create this like very specific set of criteria of like, what indicates security for you? What indicates enoughness for you? And I love this experiment because when we really get into the like the details of the definition, like we can start to actually create the shape of a thing where we would say, yeah, if all these things were true, I would feel secure. And then we can look at the material realities of someone's life and say, all right, well, are any of these things true today? Do you have any evidence that these things exist for you? Do you have community resources? I find myself doing it with people who are like you know, managed to save a bunch of money, or like got a nest egg or got a windfall, and they're like, I have more money, but I actually feel more insecure or more unclear on what enough might be now that I'm actually looking at this like potential bucket of money. And what that says to me is that in America at this time, feeling secure, feeling like we have enough actually is not, it is somewhat related to money, but it's much more related to sentiment. And I think that we're in this systemically designed kind of like socioeconomic experiment in which when people feel insecure and when they feel like they don't have enough, what do? They keep working at jobs. They keep paying taxes. They keep participating in materialism and consumerism, right? Like we keep doing things that there's like, you know, like larger culture narratives about like success that we're quote supposed to be doing. And there's these like narratives that, oh, if we do all these things, if you have a big enough 401k, you are definitely going to feel secure one day, is the narrative. And that's not true. I've talked to so many people about money, and it's, if you don't have an underlying sense of what makes you feel secure or what is enough for you, the amount of money that you have can grow and grow and grow, but you're not going to land the emotional plane of feeling that way, right? And I think, you know, Kara, in your work, like, you know, you are thinking a lot about community, and like the community piece and the relational piece that can undergird our sense of security and enoughness is often missing from these like very kind of spreadsheety analyses, right? It's one of the big things that's missing, but you know, it's such a good design if what you want people to do is like be quiet, shut up, and go to work, right? To like leave people feeling fearful that they'll never be okay or never have enough. And so I love to call it out because it's not healthy.
You raised so many good points. The first thing that struck me that you said, though, was you grew up low income. And I grew up low income with a single mother, two siblings, and we were in a very high cost of living area with very little money. And so similar to you, going to the grocery store and just putting whatever I want in the cart does feel like such a level of security.
Yeah.
And that does feel like I have enough. And my partner is very similar, even though he grew up very solidly middle class. He grew up in a very low cost of living area. And so his parents made these very middle income, maybe even lower middle income salaries, but they went so much further. And so now today he's like, if he has like $5,000 to his name, he's like, oh, I have so much money. Whereas for me, that wouldn't feel like enough money numbers wise. But if I can complete the action of going to the grocery store and knowing I have enough in the bank, that makes me feel secure. So it is funny how these things kind of show up depending on your backgrounds, your experiences, and what you fundamentally want. I don't think either you and I have aspirations to have $1 billion, right? That's just not a goal of mine. I would like to have stable housing for the rest of my life, but I don't need $1 billion to do that. So similar to this exercise you're talking about is really drilling down in what you even want from your life and your money.
100%. Yeah, and one way that I came out of like growing up in a lower income background, and I think combined with, I got out of college in 2005, I had my first job, and then it was the Great Recession, woo, you know, and so it it like really instilled in me that like you really can't trust an employer for your income, which has led me to always be someone who has multiple jobs or multiple ways of making money, because my sense of insecurity is tied to, well, what if I couldn't make money, right? Because I don't have a safety net with my family. But when I stop and look at the evidence for myself, right, what makes me feel secure, I'm like, do I have a couple different ways where money might come in, even if one stops? Okay, great. That adds to a sense of security. If I couldn't work some of my jobs, or maybe even all of my jobs, what amount of savings do I want to have to feel like I could get back up on my feet and get some other work? You know, and for me, that's 6 months of savings, right? So when I was in my late 20s and I had $5,000, I was proud as hell. You know, and now I'm in my mid 40s and I've been saving money for much longer. And so, yeah, I would be stressed. I would not be buying everything I want at the grocery store if I had $5,000 in my savings account. Not that other people shouldn't have that relationship, but for me, I wouldn't feel secure enough. And I think that your point about like how we relate to money and how, like, has so much to do with like how we came up, and you're right, like what we want for our lives. And then there's this other piece, which is what we think is possible for ourselves, right? Like people I find who have a a sense that more money will come somehow. Either they're confident in like their ability to earn money or work or their career, or they have some, whatever income streams, or people who have like family safety nets. I think we'll have a different relationship to future money than other people who like don't have those sets of beliefs.
Yes, I completely agree. And so you've brought up something that you've talked about for years at this point, which is that money is not the only currency in the world. And I'm really curious about what that means to you, and if you have an example you can share with us.
I'll give a little backstory. Okay, so I lived in New York City for 17 years. I'm an East Coaster. Like, I'm not a woo-woo type person. And so it took me a long time to get to this frame of thinking that I think other people have gotten to much faster, which is that money is like a representation, or it's an energetic thing. Because in my mind, and again, coming from where I come from, I'm like, money is the key that unlocks all resources, right? It's the thing that gets you to the dentist and fixes your car. And what's interesting is that both these things are true, right? Money is like a material resource, but it's also a representation of possibility and of energy moving around. So, sorry to all my New Yorker friends who are like, what happened? Look, it's both things are true. And so when I think about the different types of currency in the world, like just being able to think about money as representative and not just tool has helped me then start to think about, well, what else kind of moves things around? What else is a resource unlocker? And so, I mean, to me, the biggest other resource that's out there is people and relationship, and it's without other people, am I just working a job, going to the top of my hill and staying in my cabin? Like, what's happening? What's going on? And it's it's only social relationships that actually create what we would do with money anyway, right? And some of these are like, constructed market relationships, right? Like now here we are in capitalism and I don't know my dentist or I don't know my greengrocer, but I have a relationship with them, right? I'm like buying things from them. Somebody up the pipeline grew those vegetables or created the field of dentistry. And I also think about how probably like 15 years ago, I started this like queer art tour. It was me and 6 or 7 friends. We got in my van, we toured around. And the first year, my friend who I was co-producing it with and we like just didn't really understand how much this thing would cost. And we did a Kickstarter for $800, which was like, okay, look, yes, it was 2010, but it was still not enough money. But we put a bunch of friends in the van, had like, enough money for gas and for 2 meals a day. That was our terrible mistake. People eat more than that. But what happened was that we laid the groundwork for like a deep set of social relationships that we then continued to like book that tour year after year for like another 6 years, and to this day, there are like hundreds of people I know across the US and Canada based on doing that work, right? And so there's so much deep, fantastic friendship and creativity and culture in my life from those people and those relationships in that time. And I have a tattoo and I know we're on a podcast, so I'll just describe it, but it is little dimes kind of like tumbling down together into like little gold coins. Because my friend and I realized after we like looked back on that first tour, we did calculate all the hours, all the time we spent booking. We were like, oh my God, we made 10 cents an hour in money. We made 10 cents an hour in money, but we got rich in relationship from doing that tour, and that has netted benefits for me for, the 15 years after doing it. And it's just, you can't buy deep relationship. You have to build deep relationship and show up to build relationship. And when I think about currency and how I get things done, so many things got done in that world and ecosystem. We were kind of operating in the kind of punk alternative music scene type world. But shit gets done without money there all the time, much like working class and poor communities. Shit gets done without money all the time. How does that happen? It's people who are making it happen. Yes, you can use my barn. Yes, you can borrow my car. Yes, you can sleep in my guest room. Yes, someone's going to make a casserole and now we're all fed. Money is required at some level to make these things happen, but it's people who are actually ultimately the purveyors and movers of the resource.
Yes, I always say to people that, like, especially in the United States, healthcare is a nightmare. So of course you need money to pay for your hospital visit, but do you have someone who can pick you up from the hospital? Because that's also a form of currency, right? Yeah, that tour sounds dope as hell. So kind of similar to this idea of community. I feel like more and more I am seeing people talk about their desire for community, and I am specifically seeing people really make the connection of consumerism is really vapid and it's not filling this need that I have in my life. And I know the answer to that is community. However, what I'm seeing mostly in this kind of awakening is people saying, well, nobody wants to be the village because nobody wants to help me. And the answer is, if you want to build a village and if you want to be a part of a village, you have to do this unglamorous work, which is repeatedly showing up somewhere and engaging with others. And we're in this kind of weird, I don't want to use the word crisis. I think we use the word crisis a lot to describe many things, but we're in this time of living where it's very easy to live separately from people. It's very easy to lose short social contact with people. I always think about how now people wear headphones everywhere in public, so we're not having small talk the way that we were 10 years ago, let alone 100 years ago, sort of thing. We're also in this time where everything is therapy speak, and so a lot of people are like, I'm practicing my boundaries, I'm protecting my peace, which often is people isolating themselves from each other. So community building does become a very big challenge when the way to build community is to engage with other people who may annoy you, right? Or with whom you may not agree 100% on everything. And so it's not complicated work, but it is hard work. It does require effort. And I'm just curious about what you, as someone who has been talking about this in the personal finance space for a very long time and who obviously has years and years of real world community building experience, like, what do you say to those people who are sort of like, well, no one wants to be the village?
Yeah, I find this one so interesting because I love being the village. Oh man, I was like born to be the village. I'm like, the village is here, so I think there's partially this, sure, there's like some personality piece to it, right? But I think high level, if you want people, you have to be people, you have to show up like Carol, like you were saying, and we also have to allow people to be imperfect. Like we're not perfect. People aren't perfect. Some of the people in our community, are going to annoy us, but guess what? There's still, if we, zoom out 1 or 2 levels, we are still much, much more on the same plane. The differences can be smaller than we think. My example here is that I moved to Denver, Colorado about 4 years ago from New York. And about 2+ years ago, my spouse and I were like, oh, we're kind of lonely. We moved here during the pandemic. Like this was, a little tough to make friends. And we were like, okay, well, we know how to do this. Let's start having a monthly dinner. And she's Jewish. So we're like, let's have a Shabbat dinner. We'll do it second Friday of every month. And it's now, in year 2+, and we regularly have 40 people come through. And it's incredible. And it's a different 40 people every time. And it's just open door. Bring your kids, bring your mom, bring your lovers, bring your polycule, bring your bestie, like bring whoever, like tell a random person who's new to town to come. And it is like this really beautiful event where like now people are like forming their own relationships. Like there's little like neighborhood groups, across Denver who talk to each other at this dinner. And it's hard work. Like I have to clean my entire house, God, but there's always so much food. People truly show up. Like we always say, like, we'll bring chicken and challah, and then I have like some backup vegan food, but there's always enough food for everybody. The people who come through, it's just so cool. And like the point of this is, if you want a thing, try doing the thing, right? Because you can make it in the shape that suits you best, right? Like I don't have to leave my house to have 40 friends come over. This is actually great, and like we're able to like, have it be very financially accessible, very physically accessible, right? Like there's a lot of friends who bring their teenagers. The teenagers have their own little crew of people who hang out. So, right, there's different ages of people hanging, and it's interesting because when I think about not engaging in real life with people, and like, look, I'm from the 90s, so I remember life before phones, before apps, before all this stuff. So I'm going to have like a specific perspective here, but it is, some friction is required to create community for yourself, right? Some discomfort is required. And I'm not saying like outside your realms of like tolerance, everybody's an expert on that, but like there's a difference between discomfort and like in the red, right, of like tolerance. And so allowing ourselves to be like, oh, it's a little weird. I'm going to this place. I feel new. I feel awkward. Who will I talk to? Letting yourself experience that and push through it and find the people, like your point about we don't have small talk anymore. Like there's it. Yeah, our sociology friends have been looking for decades, right, at this idea of the loss of third spaces in the US, right? And there's this amazing book from a couple decades ago called Bowling Alone. It's about the end of like civic third space type hangout culture, basically, in the US. And in the last 15 years or so, we've replaced that with social media, which it lightly scratches the itch, but it doesn't actually like suit everything that we need when we're going to look for that kind of like third space community type thing. And so if, trying to find your community solely online feels unsatisfactory, that's because it's unsatisfactory. It's designed to keep you online. It's not actually designed to give you community. Right.
I think about that all the time as someone who is a deep extrovert and who has a lot of energy. I've always been the starter in my friend groups, and all my friends from college are like, well, you're a really aggressive friender. Like I'll go up to people and be like, I want to hang out with you. When can we do that? Let's put it on the calendar now. I'll send you a Google link. That Shabbat dinner sounds incredible. And
if you're ever in Denver, come through.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely will. And something that I've hosted a lot in the various places I've lived, because I lived in Austin for 11 years, I lived in Charlotte for 15 months, and now I live in central Massachusetts. And I'm a big fan of reduce, reuse, recycle, right? Like trying to find ways for waste, I'm using air quotes for listeners, to not be waste. And so in Charlotte, I hosted book swaps. In Austin, I hosted clothing swaps, and I'm doing clothing swaps again here in Massachusetts. And every time I post about it online, people are like, oh my God, I wish something like that existed in my city. And I'm like, it definitely does. Someone somewhere is doing this for sure. But also a swap could not be easier to arrange, and you can actually be the one who does that. But I feel like people are waiting for permission, or they're afraid, or they're just, so many people feel unable to take that first step. But I like what you said of there may be a little bit of discomfort, but you'll get over that, or that will go away with repetition. Like the more you do it, or the more you just show up someplace to somebody else's hosting, the more comfortable you'll get around those people, the more you flex that muscle of trying something new, and therefore your muscle is stronger to keep trying new things.
And to learn about the things that really suit you, right? Like you might go to things and be like, actually, this is like a little nerdy, not into it. That's fine. That's okay. But you're building your discernment when you actually let yourself figure that out, which is very powerful, right? To be deeper in our discernment. And that piece about waiting for permission, man, it's so, like, I tie it so deeply back to patriarchy, right? And to some of the shadowy hearts of the systems that are just so terrible, right? But that we live in. But this idea that somebody's going to run around giving you a permission slip for how you want to live your life. The only permission slips that are out there are the slips that lead to materialism, consumerism, right? Again, the well-defined paths are the ones that are most in service of entities that are not you, right? Because of how America is designed. So if you want a life that is more suited to you, you're the permission slip writer. I mean, that's what got me doing my tour all those years ago. We were like, we're not going to wait to get booked. If punk guys can do it, we can do it. God, we'll be fine, And we were fine.
And now you have, as you were saying, all of that community, and also what sounds like probably pretty badass memories.
My stories are good. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but you do bring up what I think is probably the pivotal issue of life in America today, which is the issue of trust. Because we are watching institutions that a lot of Americans had a lot of trust in be actively dismantled and disintegrated. We are living in a post-truth age. We're living in the opinion economy, where someone can say, well, I think this, therefore that is how it is, as opposed to, well, here is the evidence. And so I think a lot of people are really getting stuck on where to put their energy when it comes to the idea of preparedness for a different future world. Obviously, the future has always been unknowable, but now we're living in a time where that trust is completely eroded. So many people are making decisions based out of fear. We're being reminded and taught to fear other people, not to trust them, not to want to build with them. And we're also being told, like, don't trust the experts, don't trust the system. And here in the United States, that has always been low-key part of the American mythology. We have the idea of the rugged individual who is like battling against wilderness, battling against having to pay their taxes, you know, sort of like the cowboy who does for themselves. But the question is, a lot of Americans now don't trust the systems and instead are turning inward to individualism as the solution. Well, I will buy a gun, therefore I will be safe. I will hoard food and resources, therefore my family will be safe. And I think this individualist narrative, I mean, it's not even spiraling out of control, it is out of control. Mm-hmm. So when you're making your content and also when you're just like living your life, how are you pushing back against this narrative as you're having these questions with people about how to prepare for the future?
Thank you for this question. It's like such a big, important question. Okay, so many thoughts kind of tied to something you just said. So there's this narrative about individualism in the United States. Number one, the concept of individualism was invented in the 1830s by a French man who came to the United States, took a tour around and was like, I need to describe these people with a whole new word, you know? So how did we end up in like 1830s with this whole concept needing to get invented? Like it ties so deeply back to like colonialism, to manifest destiny, right? To the roots of how colonization started here in the United States, right? And so just we need to call that out, that like when we are like really focused on individualism, we are bearing the fruits of colonization, period, done. The other thing that I'm thinking about is, so there's so much mythology about being an individual and rugged, and so this leads us to Henry David Thoreau, right? Like one of like the original American writers, and I'm in the cabin, I'm in the forest. Y'all, his mom brought him lunch every single day. Okay, if you don't know that, like he wasn't doing it alone. Mommy was helping. Okay, so he was in the backyard.
Down the road. I am right down the road from Walden Pond. I drive by it all the time, and every time I'm like, stink face.
Yes. Yeah. Like it's like that shit is made up. The idea that we can like just be on our own with like our food store and our gun and our 40 acres is made up, and it comes out of this manifest destiny colonialism that is also toxic. So if we don't want to live in connection with those things, which I would recommend you don't, because they're hollow and they don't actually there is no bottom, right? There's only just more aloneness in those. And kind of back to this idea of enoughness, this never-ending sense that you won't have enough because any small individual or small nuclear family unit can't produce enough. I mean, like, sure, some of you are out on these streets homesteading and producing quite a fair amount. Good on you. But like writ large across society, it's not functional. And so this like thing about like, how do we create trust? It asks me, or to me, it brings up the question of like, what am I basing my metrics of trust on? Am I looking for like a one-to-one trust relationship? Am I looking for like a one-to-many trust relationship? And I think it's like a very problematic right-wing project to make us think that like organizations are bad, right? We can't trust the government and we can't trust people, you know, who are like out there trying to put things together. I'm like, y'all are talking about the water department and the people like the firefighters, and we're talking about like when we say, quote, the government, I think we should all really be investigating who we have in our minds, back to this idea of this, like, it's like we want patriarchy because we want someone solving our problems, but we also don't want patriarchy because we don't want dad telling us what to do, you know? And so it's like, is the government dad? No, the government is made up of individuals, some of whom are problematic. I'm not going to say that it's not, but the concept of creating governance isn't itself a problem, because when we start to get afraid of creating governance or groups of people who can get shit done together, when we make that toxic and we compare our like, I must be alone on the land with my gun to a group of people who can get shit done together, that's where we're creating this like toxic individualism. And for me, like, I'm an old anarchist, I'm a community organizer, I'm always thinking about what is self-organizing going to look like, right? And like, what is like healthy, useful, sustainable modes of self-organizing that we can create so that as we start to look forward to whatever the world is going to be shaped like in the future, that nobody is doing all of it. Like, that's not actually, again, that's not feasible. It's not possible. I would much rather figure out some way that, like, yeah, it might have a little bit of like convolutedness to it, but means that there are some groups of people who make sure that the water is running and the trash is picked up, and some groups of people who, yeah, are like, please, like, help the firemen, like, fire people, you know, and that there's some groups of people who are doing this and doing that. Self-organizing can look like coming together to say, what are the needs we have and how do we meet them? As opposed to, what are the needs I have and how do I meet them? They're two very different questions. You know, and I think I'm a big sci-fi reader, and so, you know, I really love that there's like so many fantastic examples of like writing that's out there. Yeah, so there's a book that I really, really love. The author is Margaret Killjoy. She's this incredible writer, thinker about prepping, but comes at it from like an anarchist self-organizing background. And her book, A Country of Ghosts, is just like this really interesting like example contrasting different modes of self-organizing and government and governance together. So if you're kind of like, what's Hadassah talking about? Governance is just the way that we organize people around us or not, you know? And so it's such an interesting book. And then Starhawk's The Fifth Sacred Thing is also a really interesting book that talks about what might a self-organizing future look like, and like the Council of Elders and da-da-da-da. You know, I mean, there's truly endless sci-fi out there that can help us start to create our own mental models about what it could look like to be getting stuff done with people in a future version of the world that isn't rugged one-off small family individualism, and also isn't just saying the government is fine as it is, right? We can always improve on what we have, and in a way that's like the best hope of democracy, right? Is being able to say we could improve on what we have without tearing it down, without just accepting that like maybe some fascist overlord should just run it for us. No, also no. You know, I don't want that either. But it's not even just a third way. There's so many other ways that we can organize ourselves together. And kind of back to, you know, our conversation about how do I find people? How do I want to be in community? I mean, there's plenty of community groups that are out there that are figuring out different variations of self-organizing. Some of them you're going to find not suitable or interesting to you. Some of them you're going to be like, oh, this is interesting, or the work is interesting enough that I'm going to like get into the organizing piece with people. And this ties in, like, I do Ride Free Fearless Money, you know, as one of my projects, but I also work with groups and teams of people to figure out their internal governance and self-organizing dynamics. So I could talk about this all day. I will pause soon. But it's so important because we can put little guardrails in place to actually figure out how we want to be together and what accountability and trust and getting shit done together looks like. That's designable, it's definable, and we can write our own permission slips to do that.
Yeah, I think like the loss of imagination is also something that really shocks me. I really am always taken aback by how many people struggle with imagining. And more frequently, I'm really annoyed with recency bias. Where people are sort of like, well, how things were 20 years ago is how things always were. And I'm sort of like, oh my God, we're losing recipes, people. Like, come on. I feel like I sound so negative this episode because I'm like, these people need to get it together. But as I personally expand my political ethos, as we watch our country struggle in so many ways, as we watch like people with actual cultural and political power like fall flat on their face in the face of these challenges coming out of the right, I find myself drawn back more and more so to how can we help people take action. Of course, there always needs to be time to kind of like explore the emotions. There always needs to be time to learn. We should always be learning more and more. But I feel an urgency to act. And so I feel a lot of my exploration and to be honest with myself, to be fair with myself, criticisms of others right now is what's preventing you from acting. And that's what I want to like kind of tug at. But anyway.
No, I think to me, it's one of the big important questions, and like wearing my strategy hat and this idea of like, you know, the work is not ours. There's a Jewish maxim, right? The work is not ours to complete, but neither can we put it down, right? And so it's within my sphere of influence, with the skills that I have, where can I be most useful? And this kind of goes back for me personally to the top of the conversation. I'm not as useful talking about high yield savings accounts. I'm much more useful right now talking about digital security, people defining their own senses of safety, and making moves yet and still, despite it all, ever forward to live the lives that we want to have. Because if we stop doing things that we want to do within our ethics, they already won, right? And I think that's especially important for people who are marginalized across race, gender, sexuality, ability, on and on and on. But it's important for everybody, right? Like, we can't be bullied out of attempting to live lives that are meaningful to us, period. And how do we create meaning in our lives? To your point, it's not shopping, right? It's looking at the world around us and saying, how can I really contribute something useful? Even if it's small, even if it's one off, right? Like, this is where we start to create meaning. Happiness is a end state of doing useful things. It's not a direct road that we get to by being like, I pursue happiness. Like, that's silly. No, I pursue meaning, and then I get joy, connection, happiness, right?
There's so much power in those words, and there's so much hope in those words. I hope it's resonating with people, because it's resonating with me. Thank you so much for your time, your expertise, your energy. Where can people find you on the internet and off the internet, if anywhere?
First off, Kara, man, thank you so much for having me. Like, these questions are so great. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to dig into them with somebody else, and with you in particular. And where can people find me? So I've got Ride Free Fearless Money is my website. I've been blogging for 10 years. Wow. So goodness gracious. And Ride Free Fearless Money on Instagram. I never took up the TikTok. I just couldn't. I've got a podcast called Have a Nice Life with my friend Pippi Kessler. Pippi's a career coach and organizational psychologist. And so we talk about how we have a whole free series, long podcast series, if you're trying to make a career change, like how you can go ahead and do that and think about that in a way that's really aligned to you. And that's really for people who've experienced like trauma and marginalization. So Have a Nice Life season 1 is all about like, what am I going to do with myself anyway? And season 2 of Have a Nice Life is all about leadership and organizations in chaos and change, like right now. So I've got these podcasts. And otherwise I can be found just around being much more chill than I was many years ago in Denver, Colorado, on a bicycle, having Shabbat. But I always do like to get back to people when they reach out to me. So yeah, those are the spots.
Yeah, I love that. I'm also very much so in my biking era right now.
Yay,
I'm
excellent.
like, I hate this car. Get away from me. I will only bike or walk. I'm happy to walk. If something's like 2 miles away, I'm like, I can walk. It's fine.